toxic Christianity had actually deconstructed me. That the way I thought about, that I am already, and when I came into this world, I'm already saved. There was never a time when I wasn't. There was never a time when I was disconnected from God. There was never a time when my nature was depraved. There's never been a time where my mind is prone to evil and, wicked in thought, and my heart is wicked. None of those things were true about me. There's never been a time when God is wrathful. There's never been a time where there's been hell. There's never been a time where I have to earn back a relationship with God. There's never been a time when God created Jesus to kill him on our behalf because he couldn't save us without some kind of death. There's never been a time like that. Those things have never existed. And who I am and who God is holy, pure, righteous, loving, pure love, affirming, all those things, right? And then deconstruction comes in there and deconstructs all that, and kills it.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in to the Taboo Faith podcast. We've got with us today, I'm Justin Johnson, host, and our guest today is Chris Kratzer. Chris is a pastor of 25 years, having served in conservative evangelical churches prior to his awakening to grace. His faith journey and dramatic transition out of right-wing conservative Christianity served to empower people throughout the world to discover, heal, reconsider, and reclaim their faith in God. He's married with 4 children, and he writes at his website, chriskratzer.com. He's also the author of 2 books that I'm aware of, Leather-Bound Terrorism and Stupid Shit Heard in Church. So, I actually have another book.
You do?
Okay.
I do. It's called Parenting by NyQuil.
Oh, I need that. Well, parenting advice, the NyQuil. I didn't know that, so I take it that's what it is. Just kind of.
That's a joke.
Oh,
I really don't.
Oh my God!
Come on, Justin.
You can tell me anything. Ask my brother. Actually, I'm the most gullible guy on earth, probably. So you got me. Nice one. I was gonna say that I got to tell you that I love the cover of Stupid Shit Heard in Church. My family, like, that's kind of like a big topic in my family, basically, like toilet paper and poop. And my brother's kind of giggling a little bit. It seems like anytime he and I or our sister on the phone together, one of us is always on the toilet. So when I saw the roll of toilet paper and obviously the title and everything, I laughed quite a bit. So thank you.
Well, there's actually some stories behind all that, because when I set out, to actually get the book, put together, I had to find people to design. My son designed the cover for Leather-Bound Terrorism, but he was working on some other projects. And so I had to find a designer for it. And then also I had to find a layout person for the text. And in both situations, I just interviewed people for it, because I really felt like because of the topic nature, because of the title, I wanted to make sure that people who are working on the book, had a heart for it. Sure. At least they didn't have an aversion to it.
Right.
And I had to go through like 2 or 3 people, believe it or not, for the cover and for the text, because they were like, hey, we'd like to maybe do this, but we can't really feel good about designing or laying out the text. I know. And so the lady who did the cover is in Canada, which kind of makes sense. And and the guy who did the layouts all the way in Thailand. So, I guess I had to go outside of the walls a little bit to find some. But that was actually her first design that she submitted.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which I really love. I love the finger painting look with crap. Yeah,
it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah,
There's
and
what's going on there.
what's kind of sad, not sad, but frustrating to me is I didn't realize when I did the title, I don't think it would change anything, but when I did, with the title, that because of the, I can't remember the words they used, but because of the resemblance, that's what they said, because of the resemblance of profanity, both Facebook, Instagram, and Amazon would not let me do any paid advertising at all. Wow. So, and so once you publish, with Amazon, then trying to go outside of that and have, bookstores and other companies, whatever, pick it up is almost impossible.
Okay.
So we really got kind of cornered in terms of being able to, get this book outside of my social media atmosphere, because really, it's kind of frustrating because I think just by the cover, people would at least stop and take a look at it.
Right.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of shocking to hear or surprising to hear. I mean, like, I could understand, I guess, if you were working with like maybe a Christian publisher or, something like that, obviously. But, I mean, it's Amazon and da-da-da. I mean, it's I don't know. That's interesting to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, just a little.
No, that's cool. That. Thank you. So I got Stupid Shit Heard in Church a while back, and I've read through it several times. Leatherbound Terrorism just arrived in the mail a couple days ago. So I started skimming through it and just kind of highlighting some things that stood out to me. But one thing, and you could, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but one thing that kind of stood out right away was it seems like there's almost like sort of an evolution, maybe what's going on in your, maybe you could talk a little bit about what's going on in your mind when you wrote Leatherbound Terrorism versus what's going on in your mind more recently when you wrote Stupid Shit Heard in Church. It almost seems like a little bit of an evolution. It's some further progression maybe into more frustration towards evangelical Christianity or something, or just more outspoken, Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Well, I probably went through about one case of beer writing Leatherbound Terrorism, and then I had like 6 when I got to Stupid Shit Heard in Church. I write best when I have a little something going on.
I can relate 100%. No, my thing is whiskey, but
yeah. Well, now we can talk about that too, because what's happened is, I've been trying to lose some weight in my stomach. Okay. So I've moved away from beer and went to whiskey because I've heard that actually, so I love like the Eagle Trace and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Man, we make old fashioned. So anyway,
beautiful.
So, but no, so you definitely are seeing that correctly, because when I wrote Leatherbound Terrorism, honestly, I'd kind of gotten dragged into writing that by a few people close to me who said, you really need to put something out there, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I really don't know that anybody really is going to care. But then long story short, I did actually, obviously write the book. And so that book, just kind of really dives into more of my story, and then obviously moving into some of the issues that changed for me. And at that point, I had a voice, but I didn't really find my voice to where it's at right now. And so I would say probably, just from my perspective on the 2 books, if you put them together, the one is kind of me finding my feet a little bit. Yeah. And putting myself out there in the form of a book, never having ever written a book. And then Stupid Shit Heard in Church is like, 3 or 4 years later. And now, more so than back with Leatherbound Terrorism, now, I have a better sense of my voice, and, and I've changed also, just spiritually as well. Right. I'm not, I dive into some of the other issues in Stupid Shit Heard in Church that I didn't really dive into in Leatherbound Terrorism, just because I really, hadn't gotten there yet. Right. But the other part too is that Stupid Shit Heard in Church, you can, because it is a collection of 80 plus, messages or whatever people want to call them. You can almost, they're not in chronological order, but you can certainly see even an evolution within the book, in terms of some of the things that are addressed. But I think, definitely very discerning that you kind of see a difference in kind of a progression from one to the other.
Yeah, for sure. No, it makes sense how you're explaining it too. Like, I can relate in a lot of ways. So Leatherbound Terrorism was written in 2017, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was like 18, maybe.
Okay.
Published in probably maybe written in 2017 and published in 18. I don't know, something like that.
So you talked about kind of like your progression or growth, or in finding your voice. And when you were writing Leatherbound Terrorism, that was kind of sort of the beginning of that, so to speak.
Yep.
Or the fine tuning of it. So like at what point, and you might address this in Leatherbound Terrorism, and I probably didn't get to that part yet if you did, but you were a pastor, evangelical, for many years. So around what time, what time frame did you kind of realize and start to make this change towards, pure grace, as you mentioned?
Yeah. So I started off actually when I graduated from college with a piano degree, master's or a bachelor's in piano performance, basically. And then I went to a 4-year seminary Lutheran guy. So I started off Lutheran. And then what really happened for me, and this is, just being honest, I selfishly looked at the landscape of Christianity at that point. And that was when The Purpose-Driven Life had come out. That's when, Bill Hybels was, doing his thing, other people, the mega church started to really come to fruition. I was like, and my ego said, well, damn, I want to be a part of that, because at that point, I mean, becoming a pastor, I cared about people and I wanted to be, caring, but deep down inside, I wanted to be the next, Ed Young or whoever. And that really, that little, that needle got shot in my veins, in terms of that. And so when I looked at that, I was like, there's no Lutheran churches doing this kind of stuff. There's got to be something wrong, right? So then I looked at the theology and like, oh, well, they believe that, you need to, pray for Jesus to come into your heart. And the Bible is the perfect word of God, which are totally foreign to Lutheranism. It's like, well, okay, maybe there's something there with that. And then, the church idea of church was totally different than committees and, stuff like that. And the hierarchy that we have in Lutheranism. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, wow, this is maybe this is where it's at. And my little ego is like, oh, okay. So I kind of made an emotional decision that I'm going to be this big guy, mm-hmm. In the Christian world. And then I spiritually rationalized it over to conservative evangelicalism. So then from there, spent obviously a long time in that world. And so, getting to your question, what was the moment for me, in terms of moving over to the grace message? I mean, it really led to a process of me being honest with myself and saying that, conservative and evangelical just didn't work for me. Nothing got better. In fact, things got worse. Mm-hmm. I wasn't more like Jesus. I'd become less like Jesus. I wasn't a better husband. I was a worse husband. I was more judgmental. I was just all the things that you think of with conservative evangelicalism. I'd become more in those things. And, all the promises of conservative evangelicalism, that your life is going to get better. And that if you pray these things, you do these things, A, B, and C are going to happen. And all these dominoes are going to fall for you in all the right ways. And, none of that happened. Gotcha. And so, I dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. And I came to an honest moment. It was like, wow, I'm more of a sinner and not less, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then I came into a place where, I think there was a mix of depression. I had a couple of health issues going on, and all that came together in kind of a perfect storm to where I basically became suicidal. I had actually, and I think it's in that book, Leatherbound Terrors. It's been a while since I've really thought about that book, but where I tell the story that, I walked Amy up, my wife upstairs into our second, floor of our townhouse that we were in. I looked at her straight in the eye and said, listen, you need to get a better husband. You need to get a better father for the kids. I can't do this anymore. I'm a terrible person. You know, obviously, you know, I'm doing something wrong in my faith. Everything that I touch turns to dust. And that was it. And I was ready at that moment to just walk away from it all. Mm-hmm. And just, you know, it's hard to recall everything, but just in a moment, you know, I just really felt, you know, kind of the arms of God in a sense that just wouldn't let go of me at that moment. And that kind of was a pivotal moment that really had me just begin to reconsider everything in my faith. Mm-hmm. And to, you know, had a couple mentors that kind of walked me through. And one of my pastor, who had been my pastor forever, really from the very beginning, he had gotten, you know, really excited about people like Joseph Prince and some of the Grace guys, you know, that were coming out. And he's like, hey, Chris, you need to listen to this stuff. And anyway, I just started to do all that. You know, the Grace message was kind of the gateway drug for me. Mm-hmm. That opened up, you know, my willingness to re-examine my sense of God, my sense of self, the world, everything around me. And that was really a process of several years that, you know, led to me really coming into, I think, what people would call, I hate labels, but what people would call a progressive pastor. Mm-hmm. Open and affirming, all that stuff.
I see. Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. That's pretty amazing. Yeah, I can relate in a lot of ways. I was never a pastor or anything like that, but just growing up from birth in evangelicalism, for me, it was a really, really hard exit. You know, my whole paradigm, my whole world, all of my best friends. I mean, it's basically like, you know, leaving family, you know, cutting yourself off, so to speak, I guess. But yeah, it's not a hard thing to go through. I know a lot of people watching this right now are going through that. And that's why, by the way, I can't thank you enough for doing this, being on here. You know, for me, what I'm doing, the Taboo Faith thing, is really just part of my quest, trying to find my way. Like I said, I grew up in apostolic Pentecostal version of Christianity. Yeah. So, you know, and without getting deep into my story, sometime shortly after high school, within a couple years after high school, maybe a few years after high school, someone had kind of showed me some things about the whole hell topic and all that, and, you know, eternal judgment and all that stuff. And that, hey, that's actually kind of like not really in the Bible and stuff like that. So that's kind of what got my wheels turning. I was already feeling some things inside, like, why are there so many different opinions within the same belief system, Christianity, you know, things like that? How do we know we're actually right? And then, of course, I'm scared to even ask that question, you know, and all that. But when I saw that hell wasn't a thing, or I should say God's wrath or judgment, eternal, that got me diving deeper, you know, into like the Bible, the scriptures, and, you know, the Greek and the Hebrew and all of that stuff. So then that kind of opened the door one after the other, like, oh crap, I think we might be wrong about this too. And then I think we're wrong about that too. But for some reason, and that was, I mean, I'm going on 41 years old now. So that was 20 some years ago. And still I lived in fear. Even though I could see in the book, you know, that I believed in, that this book that I thought essentially was God, you know, until more recently even, you know, I still had that fear just kind of lingering there, and the anxiety and everything that goes with it. And it's like, it's been like within the last couple years that a lot of that has just like the roots are now getting pulled out, so to speak. So it took a long time for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that says something about my bravery or my courage, but hopefully I'm getting more courageous and more brave now.
Well, you know, I think it's better that, you know, my grandfather one time pulled me aside. He's a big fishing guy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he was, I don't know if he was filleting a fish or something, but he was talking about sharpening a knife. And he said that you can sharpen a knife one of two ways. You can, you know, take a steep angle and it'll quickly get sharp. But the problem with that is that it will also get dull very quick.
Yeah.
Or you can, take a longer time, take a less of an angle, and it's going to take you longer, but that knife is going to last longer. And I think with the process of walking away and walking out of, conservative, toxic Christianity, I think the longer it takes, I think the more lasting, in a sense, the more, you know, uh, because I've literally have had people who will read something of mine and they'll contact me and like, oh God, that was amazing. And I finally see it all. And I'm going to, go this direction and believe this direction. And it's like this instant thing for them. And then literally I'll see them post or come back to me a week later and they're already back,
Right.
Into that, they've always kind of just, come back and, and just kind of, 1 foot forward and 2 steps back kind of thing. Right. And I'm not sure if that's really, I almost see that as being, something that's not serving that person's spirituality, well. So all that's to say that, I think it's the longer, the better sometimes.
I get it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think that applies to a lot of things in life.
Sure.
So, I was just going to kind of breeze through both books and kind of touch on some stuff that I sort of underlined, things that stood out to me. Let's see here. I should have used a yellow highlighter instead of pencil. Like I said, I'm getting used to this whole like interview thing. I'm not really like I was never a social butterfly, what I mean? But Taboo Faith, I've got a passion to do something, and I see like people like yourself, even what you're doing, and it's like, oh, I want to be a part of this. You know what I mean? I want to help get the word out. So I'm still, I'm finding my voice, my way in how to do this.
Well, I can tell you something a little bit about that, and I'm sure you already realize this, but, in taking this journey, as a writer and, just being in this world, a little bit of, quote, deconstruction and all that stuff, it really is the authenticity and the vulnerability that matters most to the people that you want to be able to help and stuff. And,
gotcha.
I do see a lot of slickness, that goes on and, like, okay. But I have found that for the people who kind of look at what I do, their feedback has been that the vulnerability is what matters most. Yeah. And you know that, but.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And this is all very real for me. And, I have kind of seen those people out there too, that, it might be a little bit more about a show or something for that. I shouldn't be judgmental. That's not the right thing to say, but, and actually you mentioned something there. It's slipping my mind, but I wanted to, let's see, what would you just say? I'll think of it. So I'm in the chapter Smoke and Mirrors. And I know you said it's been a little while since you thought about this book. So if you don't mind, can I just read a little bit here?
Go for it.
Okay. For much of conservative evangelical Christianity, their obsession with sin isn't about sin at all. And it never has been. Rather, it's about power and privilege. That is their power and their privilege. Sin has been used, abused, false flagged, and fabricated into an ultimate distraction away from their primary aspiration and goal, power and privilege. That's the truth, and until I admit it, freedom always eluded me. For if conservative evangelicalism was truly concerned about sin, several things would be happening that are most certainly not. First, conservative evangelical Christianity would be aggressively focused on their own sin, not the perceived sins of others. The teachings of Jesus that call our attention to give personal sin far greater importance than the speck perceived in another would be given top priority. The primary sounds you would be hearing from conservative evangelical Christianity would be the continuous cries of their own repenting for the countless atrocities that have been wielded from their system. In manner of faith, statement after statement, and resolution after resolution would declare their continued remorse and commitment to personal change and soul searching. The only thing they could find time and energy to boycott would first be themselves. Thousands would be desperately ridding their lives of gluttony, greed, judgmentalism, racism, sexism, bigotry, legalism, discrimination, imperialism, nationalism, and countless double standards. Churches would be selling their multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art facilities and moving to much more cost-effective solutions in order to gain the resources to reach the least of these, instead of building ministry empires and franchising Jesus. Wow. Man. I mean, you say it like it is. I love it.
I'm surprised I'm still alive sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of thought that too. Like, wow. Does he have like a bodyguard walking around with him or what? So I don't know. That kind of, to me, like all of your content that I've consumed so far and reading the books and stuff, I'm not going to say it's a summary of your thoughts and stuff or your work and, your intentions, but I mean, I think it kind of gives people a pretty good idea of what you're about and what you're talking about and stuff like that. I mean, do you want to expound on that or?
Well, I think, when you've lived this stuff and you've led this stuff and you've pastored in it and you just know it through and through. Yep. And then you look at it through an analytical, honest viewpoint. It's hard not to see this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the sin management, getting to the topic that was written there. I mean, when you pull back and you see it from, a bird's eye view, you don't even have to be that far up. Just look at it right in front of you. It's hard not to see it in the duplicity and it's just everywhere, and it's hard not to point it out.
But people in it, and I guess I'd focus more on the leaders, the church leaders, so to speak. Yeah. They would disagree strongly. That's not me. That doesn't describe me. That's not my reasons for doing this. I help a lot of people. I counsel people. I've saved marriages, so on and so forth. So how can you call me this? But the truth of the matter.
Well, and I know, and I can say those things because I've lived it,
right?
And I've seen the fruit or the lack of fruit of it.
Yeah.
So when a person says, "Well, I've counseled and I've saved marriages," I really want to question that, because how can you save a marriage with a message of destruction? How can you save a marriage or anything? How can you really help somebody by counseling them into a system that does more harm than good?
Right.
It's more evil than holy. So, I understand. And when I look back at my ministry, sure, I've helped some people, but it certainly hasn't been in terms of the spiritual counsel that I've given them. Because if I lead anybody into being more of who I was and what I believed back then, that is absolutely a downgrade in their life, not an upgrade. They'd have done better by never listening to me as I was than they would having, because it's a system that, in my opinion, is completely anti-Christ in its message and what it lures people into believing. So, it's hard for me to say those things because not everybody who is in this system is bad necessarily.
That's right.
But what you're believing and then what you're putting out there is fundamentally harmful.
Yeah.
And I don't know how else to say that, because I know, when I look back at my ministry, I look back with deep regret that I ever believed in any of that stuff, and that I ever taught it, I ever led people, and and wasted so much of my life and hurt people. And I mean, I can tell you story after story of people that I've harmed and hurt because of the theology and the belief system and the counsel from a spiritual point of view that I gave them.
Yeah.
It's, and you just look back and go, what the hell was I thinking and believing and doing?
Is that kind of, if you don't want to answer, you don't have to, but is that kind of part of why you do what you do now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Someone kind of from a critical point of view, just recently on Facebook, I'd written something and they had said, Chris, I like you and I like your writing and I agree with a lot of it, but you come across as bitter sometimes. And they said they said that in a negative way. Like, maybe you should back off from being bitter. And my response was, hell yes, I'm bitter. And I'm not going to stop being bitter. I don't see bitterness as being something that's a liability in my life, in my writing. I feel like it's a good thing. And hell yes, I'm bitter. I'm bitter at what I became. I'm bitter at, what I believe. I'm bitter at what's happening to people because of this system of faith. And hell yes, I'm going to be bitter. And the day I'm not bitter, someone needs to come over and just, end me because I'll have nothing left to say from an authentic place. So, absolutely, that's why I write, because I'd hate for anybody else to ever go through and waste and hurt and harm people in the way that system did it through me.
Yeah. That kind of brings up a question in my mind. So you've got.
See, and let me just finish one thought.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But see, when people say you're bitter, when I really am, prone to believe is that when a person's angry for longer than they're comfortable with them being angry, they call it bitterness.
I see. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like if someone's uncomfortable with me being angry for a certain period of time that's longer than what they feel is appropriate, they'll just call it bitterness because we assume bitterness, we've used that term bitterness as a negative. Well, you shouldn't be so bitter. You got to let go of your bitterness or it's going to kill you. Well, I'll tell you what's killed me. It wasn't bitterness. It freaking wasn't bitterness.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And what's saves, and here's the other thing, what is saving a lot, I don't know, what's helping a lot of people is my bitterness, because it's giving voice to the angst and the frustration and the hurt and the harm that they're going through. And they're like, oh God, I mean, hell yes, I can be angry about it. Hell yes, this is giving voice to what I'm feeling. And I don't know, and where I'm at right now, maybe I'll change in 6 months. But right now, I don't think that trying to subdue and let go and put an end to that bitterness is a good thing. Right. I just don't, that's me personally.
No, I get it. I hear you loud and clear. I think that we're kind of, if you're raised in Christianity, at least in my experience, you're kind of, there's this sense of like this perfect little person that you're supposed to be in submission, bitterness is just going to drive you to anger, and then anger is going to cause you to ask questions you really shouldn't have on your mind, and do things you shouldn't be doing and say things you shouldn't say and stuff like that. So let's just look for the silver lining in everything all the time, every second of every day.
I've got the joy in my heart. Down in my heart. Yep. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I've got the joy.
That's good. Remember, we're recording, so
listen, I could get a contract after that.
Oh yeah, no, that was good. That was good.
I might.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Exactly. We sing the songs every Sunday, or we sang the songs every Sunday to put that joy and keep that joy in our hearts, so we're happy and compliant and not stirring the pot too much, so that I think is probably part of the system that does really kill us inside. We die to ourselves as we're told we're supposed to in the first place.
Justin, when's the last time you've ever sung a worship song that started out like this? God, I think you're a phony right now, and I'm not sure what to believe about you, because I see you coming out like a drunk storming out of a bar sometimes in the way you act towards people. When have you ever heard a worship song like that?
Never.
Being honest about where a lot of people are.
Right. Yeah.
You're
100% correct. You don't, it doesn't exist.
It does not exist.
We're supposed to push those feelings and questions away, and drown them or, hide them with the joy, To me, I have found more contentment, joy, love for myself, self-awareness in not being a part of, church, I guess, and the Christian system in general. The more that I have gotten away from what I thought was God, or the Bible, or whatever, the happier I am, the more it all makes sense to me of who and God is, so to speak, at least to me. And I mean, I've truly have so much peace. I mean, I have a lot of questions still. I certainly have my days where it's like, why does suffering exist at all? If God is real, why does he let pain exist at all? Those big questions, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm right there with you. I mean, I think we just have to redefine everything.
Exactly.
And this, I mean, here again, okay. Some people think, I'm completely anti-church. Well, I'm not completely anti-church. I'm completely anti how we've defined it and what it is. Because, I am, as an individual, the church.
Yeah.
I don't need to gather with anybody. I don't need to have a unified creed with anybody. Mm-hmm. Everything that is needed for me to reflect Jesus, to live Jesus, to do everything, I absolutely don't need the church as people describe it. Because everything, is within me. And in fact, if you actually quoted one person in the Bible, they said, you lack no spiritual blessing. You lack nothing. So this idea that I need church, that I need accountability, that I need other people of like mind, that I need that support. Can that be helpful? Can it be for some people? I guess, but I don't need it. Mm-hmm. I can do everything that Jesus calls and asks and become without it. And oftentimes for me, better without it.
Yeah.
And I would even go further to say that, and let me just ask it in a question. Mm-hmm. How many churches do you actually think that are out there, percentage-wise, compared to all churches? What percentage of them do you think believe in hell or needing Jesus to save me? Mm-hmm. What percentage of all churches out there believe in that? What would you say?
And I've had limited exposure up until the last few years to other, I guess I'd say, denominations within Christianity. Again, I came from the apostolic Pentecostal thing, so that's most of what I know. But as I've gotten to know some Lutherans and some others, I still would say 99% would be my guess.
I would agree 100%.
Yeah.
So think about this. Let's just think about it purely logically. Mm-hmm. If you have that system, that belief, then your assumption about yourself and the rest of the world is that we are separated from God and we need to believe or do something in a conditional transactional relationship with God in order to mend what was broken. And that right then and there, Okay. That sets up a completely false, in my mind, in my experience, a completely false way of looking at everything in life.
I would agree.
So how can it be, let me just ask you this, how can it be good for your spirituality to be in anything, especially organized, that holds to something that fundamentally, in my perspective, is wrong about God and wrong about everything we are and have in God?
Right.
I mean, see what I'm saying?
Right. No, I get it. It's
And so, people are like, well, you're just anti-church. Well, no, I'm anti how we talk, how we view it. And then I'm anti, what it 99%, believes.
right.
And people hate, some people, I wouldn't say some people just, I can't believe you just said that, Chris.
I'm glad you did say it.
I know.
Like seriously though, because again, back when I first kind of started to, I guess you might say, awaken, so to speak, it's centered around the hell topic, and that became so obvious to me that God wouldn't judge anybody forever and throw people into eternal torment and all that stuff. That was just it was kind of like, oh cool, done. That's all I needed to know. Sweet. So and then I should add to that the idea of universal salvation, where ultimately every person ever is saved, which I do believe that is the ultimate thing that's taking place. But I did not realize there was so much more to it, because the people I were kind of the voices that I was kind of following along at that time and learning from about those topics were still, you got to be good. You got to be a good person. You got to follow the system. It's a different system. It's not the church that teaches, eternal destruction and all that stuff, but what we're teaching you, we've put it together right here for you, the actual truth, so there you go. And now you actually have the truth, and we know that God's going to save everybody eventually, once they kind of get in shape, and he molds them into what he wants them to be. Well, when I started reading people like you, it sounds different, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like you already are that. You are what he made, you as you are. And sure, there might be some, you might evolve in ways, you might learn, you might, and I don't want to use the word progress, I guess, but maybe you might grow. I don't know. You might grow in relationship with him or something, or get to know a few more things about him over time. But all in all, it sounds like you're saying, be you. You are the beautiful work of art that God's created. Celebrate that. And then that goes into all kinds of topics. And, I do want to encourage people watching leather-bound terrorism, and obviously stupid shit heard in church. Maybe start with leather-bound terrorism, I think, in my opinion, because you kind of touch on a lot of fundamental things, and in a beautiful way, I might add. Your writing is very poetic. It's very clear how passionate you are, about the things that you have to say. But you're also very logical. It seems like you've come to the point that you are and believe what you believe now based on the facts, so to speak, but also first and foremost, the love, because it really is this idea of what God is and what he's doing and what he's all about is a lot closer to the idea of what some of us would tend to believe that love actually is, true love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And what happened for me is there came a moment where in my evangelical mind, I thought I was breathing.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you walk away from that and you start to consider and think and embrace the kind of stuff that is in those books, you realize you weren't breathing at all.
Wow.
I mean, you were suffocating and calling it breathing. And it's, it's like you're talking. It's just like this. You're just like, where I'm at now is, and I'm not trying to get against the idea of deconstruction, or, be against people in the deconstruction worlds. It's a terminology, but I think that we can actually have a better terminology about it, because deconstruction, comes with a sense of that I'm deconstructing, my faith and my beliefs and so forth. But for me, what happened was I realized that toxic Christianity had actually deconstructed me. That the way I thought about, that I am already, and when I came into this world, I'm already saved. There was never a time when I wasn't. There was never a time when I was disconnected from God. There was never a time when my nature was depraved. There's never been a time where my mind is prone to evil and, wicked in thought, and my heart is wicked. None of those things were true about me. There's never been a time when God is wrathful. There's never been a time where there's been hell. There's never been a time where I have to earn back a relationship with God. There's never been a time when God created Jesus to kill him on our behalf because he couldn't save us without some kind of death. There's never been a time like that. Those things have never existed. And who I am and who God is holy, pure, righteous, loving, pure love, affirming, all those things, right? And then deconstruction comes in there and deconstructs all that, and kills it. And so what happens is, for us, we may call it deconstruction, but I kind of feel like, at least from my experience, it's more like a resurrection. It's like Lazarus. Lazarus was dead, right? And he was wrapped in these mummified bandages, right? And so Jesus stands outside and calls him out, and it says, be alive, and so, he came out of there with a heartbeat, right? So he's walking, he's got a heartbeat, but he wasn't really alive until someone took the burial clothes off of him, right? And so in the same way, we've been mummified. We've been deconstructed. We've been, wrapped in toxic ideas and beliefs about God, right? And ourselves and other people. And what happens for me was that, and I think for a lot of people, just in terms of what we think about it, is that we don't deconstruct it. We unwrap from it, and the burial clothes become unwrapped, and we realize that we were always good. We were already good. We were already whole. We were already pure. We were already, eternally connected with God, inseparable in communion and union. We were always that. And now we're unwrapping the fact that we've been killed by this. We've been deconstructed. And now, we've always been alive, and we're just unwrapping that. And we're seeing ourselves, and we're seeing God, and we're seeing life and everything for what it always has been.
Right.
And I think when we look at it that way, I think deconstruction takes on maybe a little more helpful idea. That's just, and I put that out there one time, and it's interesting because I put those ideas out there, for everyone to look at, and it was amazing. There was a lot of people who were like, "Oh my gosh, this is right. This is exactly." And I wondered why my deconstruction sometimes didn't feel like it was really hitting me in my spirit, whatever. And so there's a lot of people like, "Oh my gosh, this is a great way of thinking about this." And then there was this other group of people that were so like locked into this idea of discretion that they hated me. Wow. That they're like, "Oh my God, how can you say such things?" And I don't know, man. I know we're kind of getting down a rabbit hole, but
no, I love rabbit holes. Well, you said a lot there, and so
I did. I know it's a lot.
it's good though, and again, it kind of that again is another good summary of what you're talking about these days. And I kind of want to give people, I mean, people should go buy the books and read them, and they're going to get a really good idea of what you're saying, and you explain it well, especially in Leatherbound Terrorism. But maybe you could talk a little more, like you were saying some things in there, like, okay, so let's talk about LGBTQ. Let's talk
Yeah.
about how, let's see, the chapter here in Leatherbound is um let's see. Well, this is the real reason why you believe being gay is a sin.
Yeah. Maybe
All
this
right.
is the real reason why you believe being gay is a
Right.
sin. Yep.
So,
Well, yeah. I mean,
so,
I can
so
just,
God's cool with LGBTQ.
why, I mean, why would you hate the very thing you created?
Yeah.
And see, so that to me is just another thing, because, okay, it's very clear that you can make the Bible say whatever you want it to say.
Right.
There's like 30,000 different Christian denominations that all essentially believe something different about the Bible. Christians can't even agree about salvation.
Right.
You've got Calvinism, you got Arminianism, and they're at war with each other. Okay. So I mean, no one can go and say, you know what, there's just one perfect way of interpreting the Bible and we have it, because everybody's got their angle, right?
Right.
So I think we have to come to a place in honesty and say, hey, listen, we're all cherry picking this thing. Okay. And so what happens is you find out where the heart is at. You find out where people are really at by how they look at something. And, we're all just we're making emotional decisions, and then we spiritually rationalize them. That's what we all do in a sense. Okay. So let's take the Bible, right? So there are 6 clobber passages essentially in the Bible that some Christians use to condemn homosexuality, LGBTQ, all that stuff, right? Okay. So the question is, can we look at those same passages in a biblical, believing, Jesus loving, scholarly way that sees those passages as at least not condemning, but actually can be affirming, right? Can we do that? Absolutely. You can. You can go through all 6 of them and see that, oh my gosh, I don't need to interpret those in a condemning way to the LGBT community. I don't need to do it. There's nothing biblically scholarly that demands me to do that. There's nothing there that says that I can't love Jesus, love the Bible, and yet see those passages as at least not condemning, and I actually can see them as actually affirming. Right. So the question is, if I can do that, right, then why don't I?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to.
Right. It's against,
you don't want,
it's
that's
against the
listen,
agenda, the system.
Right. And I had to come to a place where I realized the reason why I believe these things is because I want to.
Right.
And the reason why I want to be condemning, and back then, why I wanted to do that is because that's how you control people.
Yeah.
That's how you create control and fear. And they keep coming back on Sunday morning because they feel like they need to have something fixed in their life.
Right.
It's like Golf Magazine. Every issue of Golf Magazine is essentially the same damn thing, right? You try to correct your swing. You try to hit the ball farther. It's all about performing on the golf course, right? Yeah. Same thing with church. Why do people come back? Because we're told that we've got a problem that needs to be fixing. And if we perform better, we will hit the spiritual ball longer and we'll be more successful in life, and God will do A, B, and C. It's the same thing. So, and the issue really is, if you take hell, sin, and the devil out of Christianity, right? You remove those things, Christianity has nothing left.
Right.
There's nothing to fuel it. There's no purpose to it. It has you've completely disarmed and deflated Christianity as a whole.
Yeah. It's
gone. Right. And my question is, coming back to like the issue of church, like, let me just ask you and who's ever watching, why can't it be just as simple as, the earth is our sanctuary, humanity is our community, and, you know, um, love is our worship, and that's it.
Boom. Mic drop.
I mean, why can't it be that simple?
It's true.
And find me one place where Jesus would disagree with that.
Right.
I don't know of it. It's either the aliens,
Yeah.
or the government just stepped in and said, this is getting too real.
I think I trust the aliens a little more, so let's hope it's them.
Yeah.
The thought I was having there was just the fact of how big Christianity is, and its roots are so deep just into our culture, particularly in America, in our government, and I mean, there's how many millions of Christians out there nowadays, so I mean, how do you change everyone's mind? Like, obviously that's kind of a silly question, and probably not possible, but I mean, what's your idea? What's going on? What's God working on right now? Why are, all of these children of his believing this violent system that's so destructive and teaches people that if they don't, do certain things, that God expects of them, that he's going to, torture them without ever stopping. Even, little old grandma, just because, my grandma could never, understand why God wanted her to speak in, some sort of thing that sounds like gibberish to her, in tongues or something like that. And that I was taught you got to do that to be saved and get out of hell. So what? My little old grandma's burning forever. Yeah, that's God. I mean, holy shit. Wow. I would never be friends with anyone like that. I wouldn't associate myself.
You never parent your children that way.
We fight wars against people like that. I mean, what do we do about it? What's God doing about it? What do you think? What's going on right now? What's in the works from God's point of view? Like, is he going to change everyone's mind eventually? And is everyone going to see the light?
Wow. Well,
I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you take what's happening to some people who are stepping away from that, I think you have to see that same, in my mind right now, to answer the question, I would lean towards an answer that would suggest that what's happening to people individually in that process of totally walking away from that mindset is what has to ultimately happen collectively,
right?
To where that form of toxic Christianity becomes so discredited and seen for what it is and the harm it causes, that communally as a society, it becomes so discredited and so seen for what it is that communally it no longer gains its influence.
Yeah.
And part of that needs to come to where, and I don't know if this will happen, but that, what we see happening with conservatism and the destruction and the just the nonsense and the harm it's causing in our society, I think sometimes, that's what causes people to walk away individually, is they're like, oh my God, this is just, I didn't see it when I was in it, but this is terrible stuff. And look what it's done to me and look what it's done to other people. I think that as a society is what's going to be needed to happen before, you realize that you were being a part of the poison and not the cure.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I don't see it.
Yeah. So, what do you think about this? Like when I first started to kind of learn about the eternal hell, topic and stuff like that for the first several years, once I learned a thing or two about it and I could crack open the Bible and quote scriptures about it and prove it all wrong and all that stuff, I went to Facebook and shouting it, from the mountaintops and getting into the debates, in the Facebook comments and stuff like that. And then I just kind of hit a point where it was like, this is taking so much of my time. Like, time I don't have to be spending on this. And I don't know that it's accomplishing anything. All those debates, nobody's agreeing with me, and they're so deep within the system that they don't want to come out. They're comfortable there. They feel good. All the reasons you talk about in here, they're not interested in thinking otherwise. So I just kind of stopped. I don't think it's because I was discouraged, but just for my own health. I just kind of focused on life and family and my business and all of those things, and just continued to research and study and grow myself. And I stopped talking about it for many years. And back then, the way I understood it was God's going to save everybody anyways at some point. He's going to make sure that we all see the light, and change. And, eventually every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, and so on and so forth. So he doesn't need me to say anything or to accomplish that or whatever, just, but as I kind of look at the world around me, I mean, my big question, I'm by far not the only one. It's one of the big questions. And that's why I even asked you that question a while ago, what your thoughts are on this. I mean, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of human suffering. And it's like, I'm a problem solver, like I want to solve the problem. I want to make that go away for everybody. It sounds naive, but, and I like to think that God is working out an ultimate master plan, and that the suffering is part of that plan. It helps us grow. It helps us learn. It maybe brings us to a state of mind where we can start to see more of God and in love, and that suffering plays a role in all of that. I mean, what are your thoughts on, when you think of God and you think of what he's doing to bring everyone into him, is that happening? Are we progressing? And I think that even people like yourself, and you talked about there's kind of like a movement and a change and a shift, and more people are kind of, I keep using terms like seeing the light, so to speak, or the true grace point of view. Maybe that'll continue. Are we reaching a point in time where maybe, I don't know. What are your thoughts on all that? Is God doing something to fix us, to make the suffering go away eventually? Like, the Bible talks about heaven, hell, and, we have different ideas on what is heaven. What is the kingdom of God? Is it big gold gold streets and mansions and all this stuff? Or is the kingdom of God a state of being, a state of mind within us that's centered around love and grace and patience and kindness and mercy? Is that, when we reach that state of mind, we're now in the kingdom of God, so to speak. But then does the suffering still continue? Does it stop at some point? Kind of like we were taught, does Jesus return? And now, all tears are wiped away and there's no more pain, no more sorrow. Or is that like metaphorical for something else? What are your thoughts on that stuff?
Well, I would say, a couple of thoughts came to my mind. I think personally, and this is here again, all this stuff is my opinion. So, I think the big shift towards wholeness and healing is recognizing first that we are already in him. completely. For me, there's no becoming more in him. There's no more getting closer to him. There's no more her or they, however, whatever pronoun people want to use. That's not even an issue for where I sit in terms of personal belief. And I think that's part of the healing that takes place. How much pain and suffering has been caused just because, in my estimation, we've got that wrong, right? All the pursuits that we do out of a sense of God's here and I'm here, and somehow we got to bridge that thing, or somehow God's going to come back and then whatever. So that would be one of the ideas that I thought of when you spoke. The other idea is, that I think we spend a lot of time wondering what God's going to do about these things. And yet, I think the question needs to be asked, how much of the pain and suffering in this world is not because of God, it's because of us. Mm-hmm. It's because how we think about God, how we think about other people, how we think about ourselves, how much pain and suffering has really been sourced because of that. And how much of that could really be eliminated if we had not only a change of mind about God and ourselves, but that we actually started to live that out in how we treat other people, right? I mean, you think about how much just pain and destruction has come from terrible theology, mm-hmm. right? I mean, that really is the root of it. When you think about, the birth of America, the rape and pillaging of the indigenous Indians, slavery, war, lack of health care, all that kind of stuff. If you start to connect the dots, it comes back to a spiritual disconnect from who God really is and who we are and who other people are. So I see that as another thought to what you were talking about. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, and I'm going to step out even further a little bit, I think as a human species, our lack of consciousness about God and life is what is the most troubling and painful about ourselves and about the world. And, in all kidding aside, I do believe in other species of creation, aliens, whatever you want to call them. Extraterrestrials, I think, is probably a better word. I do believe in that. And I do believe that in terms of the cosmic expanse of who we are and who Christ and love and all that's a universal reality and concept. And we as humans are certainly not at the top of that revelation and experience and embodiment. Mm-hmm. And so that's where, the pain physically, emotionally, spiritually comes, because we're just not there. Yeah. And I think that what, in terms of like heaven, I think what happens when we die is that our consciousness, our spirit, everything like that, becomes fully realized to the place that we see, without a body or whatever, maybe with a body, our total union and communion with all the universe. Mm-hmm. And the essence of life and the universe is intertwined and connected with love and, harmony and peace. And that is where pain and suffering and death are stripped away from our experience. Mm-hmm.
So
I don't even know what the hell I just said, but hopefully someone can understand it. Because I know that's kind of, things that I play with in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the things I think about all the time. So that kind of, I mean, that again, talk about a rabbit hole. I mean, that brings up even more questions. But the idea of, the Bible being the word of God, and maybe infallibility, it's infallible, or, the belief that Jesus is, divine and, God, or a part of the God family. You mentioned that, we're not the ones out here in the universe that know the most.
Absolutely not.
And that perhaps, and correct me
That's
if I'm
why
wrong.
the aliens don't come, by the way.
I don't doubt it.
Because I mean, they
I
look at
wouldn't.
us and go, "Holy crap!" I mean, these are in the cosmos. We are freaking Neanderthals.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, what sub
Especially
Neanderthal?
me. Yeah. So, is it possible that, so we call Jesus, like that's his name. And I know that's kind of a topic, like, okay, well, I think I've read that Jesus was a Latin word or something like that. And some people believe that it's, Yeshua is more proper for his name, or, Joshua, or, things like that. So, but I mean, no matter what name we call our creator, the one that we believe to be our creator, God, perhaps we're calling him the wrong name, but it's okay. That it's not live or nothing.
I'm looking out the window here for the Army helicopters.
They're
landing.
coming, man. They don't like when we talk about aliens. So maybe the aliens will come and save us, right? Take us to Mars with Elon.
Listen, that's so funny you said that, because at Christmas time, me and my kids, we created a new lyric for "Oh Come All Ye Faithful."
Okay.
And the first part is "Oh Come All Ye Aliens."
I love it. You are a singer, huh? When's your album coming out? That's good. We can talk more about that next time, maybe. So yeah, I mean, like,
you were talking about Jesus' name and everything.
Jesus, yeah, that, you know what I mean? Like the way that we're understanding, and I mean, like, people like you and I, not traditional or conservative, evangelicalism and that stuff, but kind of the place where you and I are, but we still kind of, I don't want to speak for you, so correct me if I'm wrong. I should just say for myself, it's hard for me to let go of the idea that Jesus isn't part of the God family, or however you want to say it, or, things like that. So I hang on to things that I still actually also question, because I'm at a place where I'm questioning everything I believe. I mean, if I was wrong, if I got that wrong and that wrong and that wrong and that wrong and that wrong, what else is wrong? But, and it's probably okay to do that, but is that what it's all about? Or is it just about love your neighbor as yourself, love your enemies? In other words, what advice can you give anyone listening, about what not to get tripped up on in all of this, in the deconstruct? Well, Christianity deconstructed us. In our resurrection process, we can get tripped up on some things that may not even be really that important.
Well, I would say it's probably all important.
Okay.
Because you have to, like we've talked about, this is a process, right?
Yeah.
And there's, the longest distance between 2 points is a shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're important. You have to think through these things. You have to wrestle them in a sense. You have to, because if you don't, then you can't come to an honest place where you go, okay, here's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I know I'm at that place because I've taken all the steps. No one's walked it for me. I didn't skip anything. I didn't jump over anything. I've taken all the steps to get here. Right. So I think they're all important. And they're going to trip you up, and they're going to, you're going to have to stay with an idea for a while. until you sort it out.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say that they're all important. There's nothing, but I think I can only speak to my journey, and I really want people listening to this. I'm only talk from my journey. I can't tell you, where to go, what to do, what to think, what to believe. It's your own thing. Right. And God can handle it. Right. Mm-hmm. God can handle wherever you land. Okay. Yeah. You can't land outside of the universal Christ or however you want to call it. Yeah. Universal Christ, God, universe, spirit, whatever. It doesn't matter. And that's really kind of where I'm at is those. I do sense, and people will, well, what's love? Well, I can tell you, you can tell you what it's not. I mean, if your version of love is harmful, it's hurting, it's discriminating, it's dehumanizing people, that's not love. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, but I really do think, love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, I do really think that, what God can you imagine, Justin, would come to you at the end of it all, if there is an end, or a stage in it all, and say, you know what, Kratzer, you got too far into this love your neighbor self thing, and you never got my name right. Right. You never got the Trinity right. Mm-hmm. I mean, how screwed up, Kratzer, is it for you to put yourself in the same union and communion as a Trinity? Mm-hmm. I mean, come on, dude. Think about this. What God who is in, of, and a part of this universe, right, is going to come to you and go, I imagine for human language purposes, I imagine if anything, I can see that guy going, you listen, you got all this other stuff. You thought about the scriptures, you did this, you found the Greek and the Hebrew for that, and you figured out the name and the verses and how it's connected, how it's that, and yet you freaking never loved anybody. Right. You never fed me when I was with you. You never clothed. I was with you and you saw me, but you didn't see me. Yeah. Those things, and those things I think are what remains. Here I'm quoting scripture again, but and I can't remember, it's 1st or 2nd Peter maybe, where it talks about at the end, everything will be laid bare. Yeah. And it's the idea that everything that's not real gets burnt off. Right. Right. And I think what gets burnt off is all the Christianity that we've put on top of this one thing. Yeah. That here again, that, the earth is our sanctuary, humanity, every part of it is our community. The universe is our community for that matter. And love, is our worship, and grace is our doctrine, Yeah. And everything gets stripped away from that whole thing. And what remains is, and I think that's what happens when we resurrect, all those bandages get stripped away. And what remains is that we are united in communion with God. We are in essence holy, righteous, perfect. In essence, we don't always act that way, but we are in fundamental ways. And the whole idea of life is to become more of who you already are, and to live that in love and harmony with everybody and everything else. That's where I'm at. Doesn't need to be where everybody else is. Yeah. Not saying it's a great place to be for everybody else, but just that's where I'm at in answering those kind of questions. Yeah. I just don't, I don't think much else really matters unless it's where you're at and you're walking through it. Then it all matters. But when it's like, here I am going back to the Bible, which I don't believe is inerrant. I think it's helpful. I think just like every person, we get moments where we sense and we come into, not agreement, but we come in line with God and her its nature, whatever. And I think some of the writers did, maybe 0.5% of the time. But there's moments where you go, oh, yeah. And I think one thing that, when Joshua was leading the people out of Israel into the promised land, right, he had to come back in a sense, and he made these stones of remembrance, right? And so they were a message to the people who went, and were, quote, progressing into a better experience of things, that they never go back, right? They had to take the steps, right? But there's a moment where you go, okay, yep, those steps were important, but then I need to put up these stones of remembrance to realize that, yep, slavery in Egypt, that was bad. I don't want to go back to that. This new place may be tough. It may have its own issues. It may have its own uncertainties. When we walk away from church, everything, it's never perfect. We still have triggers. We still have other questions, but it's freaking a hell of a lot better than where we were.
Right.
And so you some of that gets laid bare. You go, okay, I got to ditch this baggage. And so for me, absolutely, there are some things that I just go, you know what? I don't know if those really mean anything to me in the same way that they meant to me before.
Yeah. That's
good. I'm not.
Absolutely. That's good. And I mean, that even speaks to the question before about just kind of like, why does suffering exist? The purpose of suffering.
I have that question. Yeah. And I don't think we're ever going to be a place where we shouldn't have questions that haunt us a bit.
Yeah.
And it's not like, and I want to say this, it's not like I'm here or someone else is, you're never further along than anybody else. Okay. You're never better than anybody else. We're all together different, and different doesn't mean better. It just means I'm here and the other person's there. And what is, evaluatable or discernible is are you harming others with where you're at? Are you upgrading or downgrading? Are you hurting? Are you here again, look at Jesus. The fruit is what matters.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the evaluation of it, I think, is the fruit.
Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. And I don't want to keep you too long. I mean, I could ask you. I know
this is great.
I could ask you a million questions. I'm interested on your point of view as it relates to a lot of different topics. I mean, even parenthood. I have a son, and you touch on some of your experiences with parenthood and your thoughts and ideas of how to approach it. And even when you kind of started to wake up, how you changed your style of how you parented. There was punishment and, the typical punishment and consequences and all that, kind of moving into, I think you might've mentioned sort of no consequences, or so to speak.
Well, and I've even, that is one place where I could definitely tell you that I've kind of moved away from where some people take the grace message a little bit.
Okay.
I think that parenting is not, for me, healthy parenting is not devoid of consequences.
Okay.
I think consequences are a part of life, and that if I want to help my kids, I have to teach them that there are consequences.
Yeah.
But punishment is different.
Yes.
Punishment is adding on to the natural consequences of what is there. And that is something that, as a parent, I really try to make sure I never cross the line in that. I think there are, parenting with consequences appropriate. And that's another place where you have to really, I have to really start to try to make sure that the consequences are appropriate.
Right.
But, and not, doing more harm than good.
Right.
But punishment, God never made anything holy through punishment.
Punishment to me is revenge. It's another.
It's
word
revenge.
For revenge.
It's just, it comes from probably not any good place.
Sure.
Yeah. But consequences, I think, if you remove consequences from children and they never face the consequences of choices and things like that, then you're setting up your child for a lot of pain and suffering
Sure.
and later on. And I think sometimes, I don't know if the book gives that impression, but I think sometimes the grace message kind of can be leaning to a sense of, there's not even consequences. I'm just,
I
not
would
there.
agree. I would agree, definitely. And I think that's something that, and again, I haven't read every word of Leatherbound Terrorism yet, but people out there talking about, the, pure grace and things like that. I would say that kind of is something that a lot of people that are exploring or new to this, or, trying to figure out, what is truth or whatever. For me, for a long time, that was one of my reasons why I didn't really grab on to this idea of pure grace, because I thought, well, these people really just think we should all just be able to do whatever the hell we want and there's no consequences. And how's that good for us? But what you're telling me now is that's not necessarily the case. At least not.
No, I think it's inconsequential with God in the sense of God's not going to drop kick you into hell.
Yeah.
It is inconsequential in terms of being able to separate yourself from God, or even create distance with God, or undo his forgiveness, or whatever you want to call it, or that he'll pull his favor out of your life in all the different ways that conservative evangelicalism talks about that stuff. I think it is consequential to that, but it's certainly extremely consequential to your own self, to people around you, to the world around you. It's absolutely consequential to all that.
Yeah. You say here, what if Jesus didn't die to save us from a white-bearded, angry, and vengeful God, but to save us from a fear-driven, faithless life of believing he is angry and vengeful?
Yep.
Most Christians believe in, what is it, penal substitution theory?
Yes. Yep.
Not you.
Not me.
What do you have to say about that?
Oh, geez. I mean,
you want to go on for another hour?
I mean, come on. I mean, let's just think about that logically again.
Right.
That would look like you and I intentionally gave birth to our children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had children, right? Love them, care about them, tell them how wonderful they are, how much we care about them, how our love is eternal and unstoppable, and nothing can separate us from the love of God, blah, 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 blah. And yet we built this fire pit out in the back, right? And we kept it burning because we had this notion that, you know what? If my child doesn't believe just the right things and do just the right things, that, you know what? A loving thing for me to do would be to just put them right in there.
Right.
I mean, and I know where we got it. We got it from Dante's Furnace and St. Augustine and all that crap. But I mean, who does that?
No, might say demonic. It's
right. Okay.
I mean, it's
so let me ask you, let's ask it this way. Who do I have to become as a parent? Who do I have to become as a spouse? Who do I become as a fellow human to be more like that God?
Pretty
and what would happen to me? What would happen to me if I became that way with my children, with my spouse, with other humans? I would be in jail and probably most certainly get the electric chair.
Yeah.
But yet everybody else goes and worships this God.
Yeah.
And praises this God and says that this is holy and just.
Well, because it's all wrapped in, like we talked about at the beginning, every Sunday we go to church and we sing about the joy of the Lord is our strength. and, the peace in our heart and all these things. But I mean, it's all sugar coated. I mean, you have a chapter in here called "Smoke and Mirrors." I mean, that's what it is. I actually use that term a lot, as it relates to church and Christianity. Smoke and mirrors.
And in Stupid Shit in Church, I think I don't have a copy in front of me, but there's a chapter, I think it's titled, "You Do Know What You're Saying, Don't You?" And what it really gets into is the idea that when you believe these certain things, you do know what you're saying, right? You're saying that this is good, that this is right. God sent, I mean, when you believe in a God who creates a world where the only way that he can love you eternally is by killing his own son, right? That he's requiring of that. Do you realize what you're saying about God? That you're saying that he is not omnipotent, he is codependent on human action, and he's a narcissistic drunk who can love you one moment and then torture you the next. You do know what you're saying, don't you? And that's the whole chapter in part of that book. And I mean, when you start to think about these things, you just kind of go, do you not realize what you are saying about God and what you really believe? Do you really realize that?
And I think some do and some don't. The ones that do realize it, those are the scary ones. Because they're okay with it.
Well, they're okay with it because they see the control and the power it gives other people. I mean, gives to them over people. They see the reaction that these people come in fear and in trepidation, and it just positions them in a place of power and authority and control in people's lives, and they can do whatever the hell they want. And they get their money and they get their loyalty and they get their volunteerism for free. And, you just think about the Christian patriarchal system and like with the election, the slogan was what? Make America great. Well, the real question is, make America great for who? I mean, people think it does, but I think here again, I know what I was doing. I was lying to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was lying to myself. Yeah. Because if I was honest, I was miserable, stressed, fearful. I mean, listen, I don't know if you've done this yet, but when you dive into Calvinism, that system will scare the shit out of you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. So my daughter, who I love, right? She might go to hell no matter what, just because this God chose that she is predestined for this, and she can't do anything. She can't believe. She can't anything. She's either you're elected or you're not. Right. And I'm thinking that back when I wrestled with that, I'm like, that scared the crap out of me.
Yeah. And that's where, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where most or a lot of modern day traditional Christianity comes from. I mean, that's
50% of Southern Baptists right now are Calvinistic. And then you take John MacArthur, you take what's the guy's name? Francis Chan.
Oh, yeah.
There's a ton of people who are Calvinist, or at least Calvinistic, but most of them 5-point Calvinism. And it's like the family secret. They don't tell you that up front.
No.
And people all think, oh, these guys are great, blah, blah, blah. And it's been a while since I've had a conversation about Calvinism, so I don't remember all the names of people in that world. But there's a lot of popular names that if people found out, oh, wait, they believe in the tulip, the 5 points of Calvinism, they believe that stuff. It's there.
Right. It's freaky. It's
what's that church planning thing? Acts 20 or whatever it is. Church Planning Network, completely Calvinistic. Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort,
right?
Staunch 5-point Calvinists.
I mean, that's just taking the idea of eternal torture and just
Listen,
making it even worse, you know?
I don't think Stephen King could write
Right.
a more terrible
Yeah.
script for life.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty disgusting actually, but that's I mean that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. That I guess that's why guys
And
like
that's why I
you,
say it doesn't serve. I mean, who does this stuff serve?
right? Yeah, well you're right. It's like you said, it's the ego of the leadership, you know, within the
It was
system.
mine.
It's self-serving. But I mean, how many? So you being a pastor and being in that world, you know, how many Christian leaders, whether pastors or Sunday school teachers, whatever, um, how many of them understand what they're doing and do it with ill intentions, intentionally, like for their own self gain? Like you mentioned, you kind of realized that that's why you were doing it, but when you were doing it, you didn't know that's why you were doing it. You know what I mean? So how many out there? Because if there was a pastor listening to this conversation right now, and you know that's why this is taboo faith. It's not talked about in Christianity. These things aren't. They're gonna say that's not me. That's not why I do what I do. I love my flock. God ordained me to be the shepherd of my flock, and their blood is on my hands. And that's why I do it. And that's why I take it serious. Because if I don't get them saved and keep them saved, they're going to suffer for all eternity, and their blood's on my hands, and God's going to judge me for it now. And I might go to hell. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Yeah.
that's why this is important. And I love my flock. I love them.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
don't do it for all those bad reasons. I mean, how
Yeah.
many of them know what they're doing?
That's a hard question. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I do know that I don't think there's well, I don't know, but my guess would be that there's not many pastors who have not honestly asked themselves the question, what am I doing here?
Mm-hmm.
I think the question has been raised about, wait, is this really true? Is this really right? I'm looking at this family and I'm telling them that if their child was not baptized as an infant, doesn't matter. They're going to hell if they die.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we could put many pastors and leaders to be without excuse or with excuse to say that, they never thought about it. And I do conservative evangelicalism. I gotta turn that off. Conservative evangelicalism, has its own grip on you. The system has it in a way that there's almost no escape hatch. Because like you said, it's the idea, well, wait a minute, if I don't tell these people this, then I'm going to go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you can't get out of it without a lot of risk spiritually, and willing to negate your own beliefs. Like you talked about at the front, that like, gosh, if I believe a certain way, then, am I wrong? Maybe I really am wrong. Maybe after all this deconstruction, I'm going to realize, oh my gosh, I really have screwed this up.
Yeah.
So it always has that leash on you that can, in your sense of fear can, reel you back. But the intentionality of it, I don't know. I mean, I do know that I've met a lot of people in leadership and pastors within the Christian world who are absolutely intentional about it.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they're doing. They know what they're saying. They know the harm it's causing, and they do it anyway.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story from my own ministry. I was about maybe a week or two before a particular Sunday. A lady in the congregation came up to me and said, "Hey, Chris, I just want to let you know, a couple Sundays from now, I'm going to be bringing one of my friends. She's lesbian, and she's also, I think she's like Buddhist or something like that." And she said, "I just want you to know, because I don't want her to be uncomfortable, and I know, and I just thought I wanted you to know." Well, Justin, I took that week or two in preparation for the sermon, and I freaking doubled down. And I know you know me, and other people listening probably know something of me. They're like, "What?" I doubled down. And my sermon, actually, I had started to prepare because it was a series. So I knew what I was going to be talking about. And it really had nothing to do with being lesbian or of another faith. I had to work that in. I intentionally worked that in. And I'd seen where she came in, sat in the back. At the time, the church was about 400 people. And she sat in the back with her friend. I recognized that. And I looked over to that corner of the sanctuary. And I just said something like, "You know what? And if you're here today and you don't believe in Jesus, and you feel like, God approves of a man and a woman and a woman, you need to consider, because God does not condone," something like that. Mm-hmm. And no sooner than that lady and her friend got up and walked out of church. Never saw him again.
Yeah.
And I think pastors and leaders, and participants, some of them don't know. Some of them don't realize what they're doing. And they go in with great intentions, and they feel like they're doing the Lord's work, right? That's the toxicity of that system, right? Yeah. It can brainwash the crap out of you. And you think that up is down and down is up, right? But I think people in leadership, particularly pastors, what happens is, what happened to me, you get so intoxicated by the control and the power and people admiring you and listening to you and all that stuff, that all that other stuff, you're just like, you know what, you just kind of put it in the back seat and like, you know what, well, I don't care. It doesn't make sense. That person's hurting. That person's leaving the church. Addition by subtraction, all that crap. And so you just pass it off because your heart, your ego is so connected. Those tubes are so connected to this toxic thing that you just, it just calcifies your heart.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's really crazy.
And I'm not trying to judge. I'm not trying to judge other people.
Right.
I think, but I know what it can do. I know the Borg, that it creates. And that's why, we talked about being bitter. I mean, you can unknowingly get into this thing with all the good intentions and come out evil.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Happened to me.
Yeah. Pretty sad, actually. It's just shocking, the whole brainwashing part of it. And the people that that I mean, they're genuine people. They're good people,
Yeah.
But I would agree, and I would say brainwashed, to some extent. And
here's another question: how many people come out of homes of emotional abuse? How many people come out of homes of parenting by control and guilt?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was me. I came out of, and I dive into it in the first book about the sexual abuse I encountered and the legalistic dad that I had and the family system that if you didn't perform and you didn't live up to the Kratzer name, you were given a sure message, maybe not verbally, but you got a strong message in action and atmosphere that you are not measuring up. So you okay. So you walk out of that family system and that abuse or whatever, that I would say probably 75, 80, 90% of us grow up in to a certain degree. And then you're already pre-groomed.
Yeah.
You're already pre-set up to walk into a system, a spiritual system that is the same.
Mm-hmm.
The messages are the same. If if you don't do these things, if you don't live up to this expectation of belief, punishment and rules and all the things that you get in your family of origin, typically, you're just already pre-cocked and loaded to become seduced by this other system. And what's even worse about it is that is all spiritually justified now.
Yeah.
And it's not just whether or not you fit into your system and your family anymore. Now it's whether you're going to heaven or hell.
Yeah. How do you?
There was a study done years ago that said that 60% of all people who become pastors were sexually abused.
Wow. Wow.
I think it's no, I'm sorry. Let me back that up. It was 60% of all pastors came from a family of sexual abuse. That's what it was.
Wow.
Yep.
That's shocking. Well, I don't want to take up your whole day. Like I said, I could.
We can do part 2.
Talk. Yeah, that would be cool. I appreciate that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for even coming on. This.
Thanks for having me.
This
Golly,
has been.
It's an honor.
Well, yeah. This has been super fun. I kind of wanted to. I think at the end, and I apologize. I love stupid shit heard in church. And I wanted to kind of get to some stuff on that, but you know what? People can go buy it. But I kind of wanted to sum things up just by reading, I think at the end of Leatherbound Terrorism. Yeah. You mind if I just read the last 2.5 pages?
Go. Do it. Do it, man.
All right.
Get her done.
Get her done. For the person who has been caught up in the conservative evangelical system of faith, who is searching for answers, asking the tough questions, and even reconsidering their long-held beliefs, there is purpose in the pain. For the parents who lay sleepless at night, fearing for the life and future of their LGBTQ child in a country filled with spiritually rationalized bigotry and hate, there's purpose in the pain. For the transgender person who carries the constant weight of religious oppression, discrimination, and demonization, there's purpose in the pain. For the minorities that are exploited, abused, and deemed as lesser humans by much of society, there's purpose in the pain. For the person sent to the curb by their local church for failing to meet expectations and submit to their calls for compliance, there's purpose in the pain. For the pastor who is exercising a newfound bravery to stand up against the evils of conservative evangelicalism, there is purpose in the pain. For the unconditionally loving Jesus among us and in us, that is the constant target of conservative evangelicalism in its war on grace, there is purpose in the pain. For the misfit who doesn't fit in, for the victim who fears another day, for the discouraged who struggle to find a way, for the accused who have long been misunderstood and shamed, and for the voiceless who long for the strength in the words for their song to be sung and their cries to be heard, there's purpose in the pain. Standing, resisting, crying out in fierce solidarity, giving voice to the voiceless, listening where no ears have been willing, defending and proclaiming the sacred values of all the discarded, living with a bravery of epic proportions that only a heart captured by grace could compel. shouting for equality where there is none, ranting for justice where there is none, and chasing evils out of their shadows where they have long resided unchallenged. These are the places where one finds the deepest purpose in life, to be fully yourself and fight on behalf of those who know not that joy, taking the pain of your oppression and the story of your plight, that it might empower another to overcome and discover true life. You are the revival God is bringing to the world. You are the stars shining in the sky to light up a world blanketed by religious darkness. You are the revelation of Jesus, ushering in an awakening of the world to grace. You are the hope. You are the sacred. You are the eraser God is using to erase hatred. Be no longer afraid. Don't give up. Don't give in. There is always hope. There's always the awakening to a new day in a new way. In a world where much of conservative evangelical Christianity shows little restraint in crucifying all that is truly divine, hear the call of Jesus on your life. Take up your resistance and follow me. Grace is brave. Be brave.
Wow.
Awesome.
Did I write that?
You did. No, that's inspiring, man. I appreciate your work very much.
I appreciate you, buddy.
Yep. Look forward to
Thank
more
you.
conversations. And,
Part 2 to come.
Part 2 to come.
I'll have a new song as well.
Rock and roll, yes. In that third book, the Parenting and NyQuil. I'm looking for that one. So
yeah, Parenting with NyQuil. That's
right. Cool, man. All right. Hope you have a good weekend.
Hey, thank you, buddy. Take care.
Take care.
You bet.